You are fed up with Windows, but you have a Nvidia GPU and are reluctant to try Linux as most recommend AMD GPUs? Or are you curious of how a Nvidia GPU performs in games in Linux? If so, stick around as I'm gonna check the performance of a 5080 in some games at 1440p and 4K and compare Windows to Linux. For testing, I'm gonna use Nobara Linux with the latest updates applied at the time of testing. I know that some of you will ask if anti-sync is enabled, so I want to assure you that by default Nobara enables it. This time around I used the latest Nvidia beta drivers at the time of testing, that is 59.44, as in the comments section of a previous video some suggested that these new drivers bring much needed improvements. When it comes to the translation layer, I went with ProtonGE. As always, I will show the settings used for testing before each side-by-side run. Keep in mind that at 4K in most games I used upscaling. First, let's start with a game that runs native in Linux, Counter-Strike 2. I tested this game at 1440p and using these settings, Windows enjoys a 11% performance advantage while the 1% low values see a 28% advantage, again in favor of Windows. Let's move now to Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, the only game that I tested with path tracing and some aggressive upscaling. As we can see at 1440p, there is no difference between the two operating systems. When I bump the resolution to 4K using these settings, again there is no performance difference. On Nvidia GPUs in games that use the Vulkan API, Linux is on par with Windows. Let's now move to Clear Obscure. First, at 1440p, using these settings, we can see a big performance gap, with Windows delivering 38% better averages and a huge 67% performance gain in the 1% lows. At 4K, using these settings, the gap shrinks to around 16% when looking at the averages and the 1% low values. A game that was tested with only ray tracing is Ratchet & Clank, and at 1440p, using these settings, Windows enjoys a 18% lead, while the 1% low averages are around 30% better in Windows. At 4K, using these settings, we see that the difference in averages is consistent at around 17%, while the 1% low value advantage drops to 23.5% in favor of Windows.
Mort's limeade recipe's slowly coming along.
I will mention one last game to keep the video short, Borderlands 4. At 1440p, Windows has a 33% advantage in averages and a 42% advantage when looking at the 1% low value. At 4K, using these settings, sees Windows 11 taking a 44% lead when average FPS is considered and only 34% when looking at the 1% low value. And here is the chart for the games tested at 1440p. Keep in mind that Ratchet and Clank and Indiana Jones were run using ray tracing and path tracing. Now, this is the chart where you can see the difference in percentage of using Windows over Linux paired with the 5080 while gaming. The 4K chart shows more or less the same thing. Windows 11 is still better than Linux when gaming when using a Nvidia GPU. As you can see from the performance difference shown in percentage, the only game where Nobara paired with a Nvidia GPUs matching Windows is in a Vulkan API game, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. While I don't have any issues running applications or doing day-to-day tasks using a Nvidia GPU, when it comes to gaming, there is still room for improvement. I created this chart where you can see the overall performance advantage. I'm going to focus on the right chart. As we can see, at 1440p, we can expect a 25% advantage for Windows with an even bigger gap of around 30% in favor again of Windows when we consider the 1% low values. The difference is obtained while testing these games, but should hold up in most with a few exceptions here and there, like Indiana Jones for example. I summed both the averages and the 1% low, and we can see that, in green, the overall advantage stands at 28%. Not sure if this is helpful or not. And this is the exact same chart, but at 4K. This result is not because of Nobara or Proton GE, it's because the Nvidia drivers are subpar. Now, the bottom line. For everyday use, using a Nvidia GPU, you will have no problem in Linux. When it comes to gaming, you will not have issues, but you will lose performance as opposed to Windows. You should decide if that is important to you or not, but have this in mind. A 5080 in Linux will behave like a 9070 in Windows or between the 5070 and the 5070 Ti. There is always the option to dual boot. This is what I'm doing as I still play some competitive games that don't work in Linux. Think of an operating system as a tool and choose the best for your needs. And that's it for this video. If you liked the video or found it useful, hit the thumbs up button, consider subscribing to the channel and let me know in the comments below. Why are you still sticking with your current OS and not changing? I hope to see you all in the next one. Take care.